we find that it's not one thing that people tend to do with this skin to skin is just add it to the big list of things that we have to do. Okay, oh my goodness, now we have all this stuff we've got to do, and one more thing is skin to skin. So put them on there. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, are they done? Good. Now we can put them on the warmer. That's not the point. Okay, that's not the point. The point is to put them on the mom and leave them alone, except you monitor them. So, I mean, we had a hospital I went to, again, no one in this room, and they already are now baby-friendly. And when we went there, and we discovered by talking to the moms, not all that long before they were assessed, that these babies were only going skin to skin for about 10, 15 minutes. And no one had really picked that up. The chief of OB, his babies were going for an hour. So he was just horrified when we told him this, and the lactation consultant had a total meltdown. And they just went nuts because they thought it was happening, and it was really only happening for about 10 minutes, and then the babies were being taken away. So they all went down in tandem that day to the OR and started, I think the lactation consultant was in tears, and they said, leave them alone, just leave them alone. Put them on the mom, and do the APGARs on the mom, do the tests on the mom. Eyes and thighs can be done within it's an hour. The state law is an hour, so you can wait till the end of that. Doesn't have to be even an hour. So you don't have a law that tells you. Some states they have a different law. So that you can wait on the eyes and thighs. So you don't have to do any of that stuff. The point is to put them with the mom and let everything calm down and relax. That's the point, okay? Now, of course, people say, well, the mom's not going to want this smelly, dirty baby. That's why you're doing your prenatal education. And I promise you that most of your moms will love this. They just do. People just like it. And then, of course, the other thing is the new phrase of skin to floor. We don't want, I'll give you that so you're prepared when you hear it, okay? You don't want moms dropping babies, and actually, you know, we just I came here from Minutiae, which is a big national conference in Virginia, and one of the talks was about safety, because all of this represents a change in practice, all of this. And when you change practices, you know, you have to be careful that you change them safely. So you do want to make sure the baby's monitored, that they're not being, you know, done when they're medically unstable, which is not the point. Okay. So the step 5 speaks to if your baby, especially if the baby's going to intensive care, or in some of the smaller hospitals, if they're being transferred somewhere else, you need to have the mom start to pump within the first 6 hours of life. And you need to have them hand express. So you need to make sure that, you know, milk, we've got Dr. Simon here. Milk for NICU babies, we have a few neonatologists here, and Dr. Simon's going to talk about some of the neonatology stuff a little later. But it's really, really critical for babies in intensive care because it's much, much healthier for them. So we want to make sure that that population is set up to get human milk, and that the moms are taught to pump and should be pumping within the first 6 hours of life. That's an evidence-based step. They know that if you start within 6 hours, you produce more milk going forward. And then manual expression is something that you must learn. And if you remember at the beginning, we talked about the international initiative and how manual expression is particularly important. I mean, obviously, it's important for anyone. Many, many women get engorged. You don't want them pumping out all the milk and then making more milk if they're engorged. Maybe they use a pump a little bit to get a little milk out, but they can use hand expression as well. And also when they have a baby in intensive care, they can often hand express if they're taught to do it properly and get milk out that way before they can get it from a pump, because hand expression is a lot more effective than a pump in the early stages. So you must learn how to do that, okay? And again, it's tested by mom interviews, staff interviews. Can people teach this when women's taught it? Becky has Becky has some famous boobs that you can use to show them. And now, like, they're being ordered all over the country. And as she says, they do not come. She does not come. They do not come from a medical supply company. So now my research assistants are getting boxes of like adult-only broadcasts. But they're actually very useful because you can use them on a breast pump. And these are not those. These are other cloth ones. And one of the myths is that they're not really going to ask us doctors to demonstrate hand expression, are they? And actually, they are, okay? And this begins to drive me nuts. I go over the country, and I have to be frank, like, you guys who are doctors out there, you're looking at all sorts of things all the time, right? Like, all sorts of parts of people. I don't know why, I feel like sort of just throwing these around because, like, it's no big deal compared to everything else you're looking at all the time to deal with the breast. And unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with it. So you're not alone if you're a pediatrician in this room and you don't know how to do it. And some of you I've already taught how to do it, and some of you Becky's already taught how to do it. But it is something they will ask, and you need to do it, okay? So I feel like doing like a whole talk on let's get over this problem with hand expression. Step 6 is give babies, basically get rid of all that extra supplementation that Becky was talking about. I promise you, there's no way, and I don't say this because it's Oklahoma, there's no way you're only at 25%. There's nobody that's only at 25% in the whole country as a state. You are definitely supplementing more than 25% to babies. It's just the way it happens, unfortunately. And step 6 tries to speak to that. Babies should be just breastfeeding. Supplements should only be for medical reasons, and they should be documented, okay? And if they are being supplemented, you need to offer alternative feeding methods to moms, and the hospital must pay for its formula. This is a sad fact of Baby Friendly, or a good fact of Baby Friendly, but it is a fact. It's not a myth. The hospital needs to pay for its formula, okay? And again, you'll see this afternoon I do a talk on the history of infant formula, and I hope that will explain to you why you need to pay for your formula. So formula feeders also need to have education. They should be doing it either for a medical reason, that the mom can't breastfeed. In this country, for example, she could be HIV positive, or using a small number of medications that are contraindicated. There aren't that many, or illegal drugs or something like that. There aren't that many moms who cannot breastfeed physiologically, a few, but very few. It should be kind of obvious to you. It's unusual, and of course you have to look. They may have had surgery or something that you don't know. It's unusual that women can't breastfeed without a very strange cause. So most of the women who do formula feed for medical reasons, it's something else that's going on, not that they cannot feed for that. But they may choose to formula feed, and that's what I say. And people always, there's this whole thing about making them breastfeed. I mean, our job as healthcare providers is to give people the right information, okay? If we helped them and supported them and gave them consistent education and didn't give the baby a bottle in the night and didn't do all this stuff to undermine them, you're already halfway there, okay, or farther than that. If at that point, and we're doing everything right, and they've been taught prenatally, and they're being helped postpartum, and everything's being done correctly, if they choose to formula feed, that's an informed choice. They can do that. But most of our moms are not at the point where everyone's helping them, things are going well for them, and we're actually giving them the right information. Most people are not even at that point. So most of the supplementation, and the reason people don't meet their own breastfeeding goals, is because somewhere somebody messes it up for them and they're not supported. You also need to prepare, have information for moms on formula feeding. You cannot teach that in a group. You have to teach it one-on-one, and you have to give them the information about how to make the bottles up. Myths is that the hospital's never going to have any formula ever again. Like, those people are going to take the formula, and we'll have these babies, and there won't be any formula. That is not the case. The question is, how does that formula get there? You have to pay for it. And of course, once you start paying for it, you need to monitor it more carefully because you're paying for it, so now it's costing money, so you don't want to be giving it out at the back door and people are coming home and taking it home in crate loads because they had a baby, all of which is completely legitimate. Formula people will give crate loads to the nurses and the doctors and the cleaning staff. Anyone could have it because it was free. Well, that's not going to happen anymore, so it's going to be a lot more restricted. People have come up with various solutions for this. Some people put it into the Pixar, so they omnicell, they lock it in. A hospital I was at on Navajo last week, they didn't lock it up, but they had it in a cabinet and they had like a formula sign-out sheet on top. So people just signed it out and said why they used it. They weren't actually locked up. But it is, basically it gets to be treated like a medication. It's just like a medication. People start to use it more sparingly for more medical reasons, and then it becomes, you need to monitor what you're using. Rooming in is another great one. This again applies to everybody, whether or not they're breastfeeding. Moms and babies should remain together 24 hours a day. Now, there's this funny thing about 23 out of 24, which I'm not going to really go into, but basically the principle for this is that the only reason moms and babies should get separated is a medical reason, okay? And there are all these tools that you can use to help moms. So that actually up there is a light, and that's from Claremore Hospital. They have portable lights. This is a Euro bath that I think, Claremore, you've got one of those now, right? So that's a bath on wheels. This is from my hospital. This is a billy bed, so that baby is being treated for hyperbilirubinemia. But I love this picture because look at the mom. Like, don't tell me these moms want their babies to go to the nursery. She's right there in the room and she's still looking worried about the doctor handling the baby. She's all on edge. So, they want to have this done in the room. The doctor should be doing the exams in the room. And this is some of the stuff around rooming in. Let me see. No. And so how is it tested? Well, you want to document it too. Get credit for what you're doing. Sometimes the moms are really sleepy, and when we asked the mom how long was the baby out of the room, they were like, oh, hours. And it really wasn't hours. And you say, why? And she said, for a test. And that's kind of all you get out of the mom. Like, the mom was out for hours for a test. And then you have to look at the medical record. So when the baby goes out, you have to say why it went out. When the baby comes back, you have to say when it came back. You have to document it. But man, that's an awful lot of documentation. So really what you want to be doing is not taking them out and then you want to have to document. Because if you don't take them out of the room, there's nothing to write down. So just don't take them out. And then you get rid of all that documentation. And it actually becomes easier to simply leave them there and do everything in the room. And so the point of this step is to go from this, which I'm sure we've all seen in our past, to this, which is the neonatal observation unit. Many hospitals are renaming them, and this is kind of one of the fun things about Baby Friendly, how this sort of spreads from place to place and conference to conference. They're switching off the lights and they're calling it the neonatal observation unit, and no one wants their baby in the neonatal observation unit. So that is how a lot of hospitals are handling this. I was at the NHQ meeting. 2 of the hospitals had construction on their nursery for like 2 months, and so they had mandatory rooming in, and they were really miserable that they had to open them again. But they did say that basically once you've made that break and you close the nursery, people stop using it. And we've gone to sites ahead of Baby Friendly USA a few months, and we've just said, this rooming in isn't consistent, and 2 of those sites said, okay, we're closing the nursery. And this is another thing I learned at NHQ this weekend. They now have the nursery on wheels. And it's basically a cart full of everything you need. And instead of that nursery nurse sitting in the nursery and doing stuff, she takes the cart, gets some exercise as well, and she pushes it around and she does everything in the room. Nursery on wheels. The now. Now, there's also this myth that babies are somehow safer in the nursery than they would be with their moms, because moms might drop them or lose them, or someone's going to come in and run off with a baby from the room. Who of you hasn't shuddered at this similar scenario? Mom 1 Brown and Mom 2 Brown, this is from the newspaper, I just plagiarized it, had baby girls on the 1st of January, I know your American dates, in January. Mom, being monitored, wasn't allowed to see her baby for 24 hours, during which time Mom 2 got the baby, or the Mom Brown baby, and breastfed her, but then a nurse told her later that baby wasn't hers. And then there was also an incident at the nursery window between the 2 moms arguing over the baby, and then it took 30 minutes to find baby 2. Lord knows where baby 2 was. And as Mom's lawyer said, there are so many ways to prevent this from happening, and the hospital failed in every way. This is a recent report from Brooklyn Hospital where the babies were mixed up. There are risks to having these babies in the nursery. People get mixed up. The medications, we had an incident at our hospital where the glucose water was accidentally packaged in the same stock, in the different package that looked exactly like a medication. All these babies in the nursery that had been getting glucose water were actually getting the medication. There are infections that can be transmitted in the nursery. The nursery is not really that safe like we all think. So there's no reason, safety-wise, that babies will be safer in the nursery than in the room. Step 8, encourage breastfeeding on demand. This is kind of supposed to be easy. If you have all your staff trained per step 1 to do cue-based feeding, then you should be transmitting that to your moms, and your mom should be feeding on cue, recognizing feeding cues instead of on a schedule. The easiest way to deal with that absolute burning desire we all have to tell moms how often, because we think maybe they won't feed them at all, is to use the AEP statement, which says 8 to 12 times in 24 hours. Okay? That covers you in terms of frequency, because if you say every 3 hours and you're a doctor, or a nurse, or anyone with a uniform that looks kind of like the mom thinks they know more than they do, what's going to happen is that mom's going to go home and she's going to wait, you know, and the baby's sitting there screaming. She's like, oh, that doctor told me every 3 hours, so I must be wrong. I must be interpreting this wrong. The baby can't really be hungry. And that's why we don't do that every so many hours, because that's what the mom goes home with. And then she forgets that she really knows what she's doing. One of the interesting things that I gained from NICHQ, which is a very creative forum, they were talking about how in the olden days, you know, nurses were pretty much like bodyguards for the babies. And the babies all had to go to the nursery, and the nurses just really made sure that no one got near them, and even like the moms. And then it kind of transitioned the entire model, and then the nurses became concierges, hotel concierges. And they were like taking care of everything. Oh, you want water? Yes. You want me to take the baby out? Yes. Yes. Everything was being done. And now they're in the mode of sort of being a personal trainer, right? So you're supposed to be helping the mom, but sort of inspiring her what to do. And, you know, she's the one that's doing it, but you're there for her. And I think nursing has gone through those transitions. So, you know, we have this sort of desire as clinicians to give them some rules so that we know that we're covered. But to every 2 to 3 hours is not the answer. And some babies feed much more quickly than others. So again, if a baby's feeding kind of sleepily and slowly, but they've been there for 10 minutes and that's what the doctor told them to do, people will, you know, take them off after 10 minutes, and that's not what we want them to do. And again, this is judged by assessing people. This is one of Becky's clocks. This is a breastfeeding clock. The clock doesn't breastfeed you, but it has a lady there who is breastfeeding her baby. And Becky has and her husband have an amazing collection of clocks, and this is one of them. But one of the funny things, and this was not just once, this has now been said to me 3 times when I was doing sort of test interviews, how often should you feed the baby? People said, on demand every 3 hours. And actually, this is a kind of interesting phenomenon of all this book learning that everyone's doing out there, is that people are learning all this new knowledge. It's really great, but they're not actually necessarily replacing the old knowledge. They haven't quite learned to let go of the stuff that they really thought of before. So, you know, they're on demand every 3 hours, but they're kind of saying, well, especially when they're under pressure and someone's interviewing them, what they remember is the old safe ways, and they go back to that. So they try to combine them, which, of course, doesn't work. But just be careful that you do have people who are really bought in and that they've really absorbed the new stuff. But not only that, but they've gotten rid of the old stuff as well. And the 8 to 12 times in 24 hours, I really like that because it kind of gives you a guideline without being every so many hours. Step 9 is to get rid of the pacifiers and the bottles that are all over the place, and some places are just totally traumatized by the idea of getting rid of the pacifiers, but then, as many places have said, you do it and nothing happens. Like, you do it, nothing happens, just get rid of them, nothing happens. Before you do it, you probably need to tell people you're about to do it, because if you don't, well, everyone gets freaked out. They think that all their CERC babies and all their NICUs are going to lose the pacifiers, and that's not the case, okay? If the baby's undergoing a painful procedure, or if it's a preemie in the intensive care unit, those babies still have pacifiers because there's a need for those babies to suck. The NICU babies are not with the mom all the time, although the new NICU guidelines are calling for 24-hour kangaroo care, but again, that's kind of Sweden where they have 18 months of maternity leave, so... but yeah, pacifiers will still be available. Yeah, they really do have 18 months of maternity leave. When I was in Sweden and I said they have 6 weeks in America, I got the same rippling. How can they possibly manage with 6 weeks? And I'm like, they don't even really get 6 weeks. So it's kind of a cultural thing. But babies will be able to get pacifiers if they're in the NICU or if they're having a CERC, but then you need to throw them away. And of course, people can provide their own pacifier. Now, this is actually something to look out for. There's been a few circumstances where moms have brought in either their own pacifiers or even their own formula. And people weren't aware of that in the hospital necessarily, so you've had babies documented as being exclusively breastfeeding or not using a pacifier, and the mom's brought one in. Again, you know, that's okay. I mean, we need to kind of know that they're doing that. But it's okay. We're not going to say, well, you can't bring your own pacifier. If the mom wants the baby to have a pacifier and she brings one in for it, that's the mom's choice again. So we can educate her. We can talk to her about why, you know, when the babies are kind of new and sleepy, we don't really want them to have a pacifier, because if they do that, they're going to sleep through their feed and they're not going to eat, and then we're going to be worried about how much they get to eat. But if they want to bring one in, that's fine, that's their choice. But it's not, the hospital's really only responsible for giving out things that promote health. And in newborns, pacifiers don't promote health. Now, we do know that there's evidence in the AAP talking about down the road and SIDS, but that's not till they're over a month of age. So in the newborn, the pacifier is not a health-promoting thing, so why would we give them one in the hospital? There's no need to do that. One way to do it is, again, put them in the Pyxis, lock them up, have them chartered to go out, or keep them in the circ room. And then there are some places that have things like, there's like a stop sign, it'll be stop. Did you throw away the pacifier? And there's a bucket there, because otherwise they sometimes go out to the floor. When I worked on the floor, we did all this stuff because I became baby friendly. And actually, this, to me, everyone was worried to death about this. They said, we're going to have this nursery full of screaming babies and no pacifiers. And we're like, well, actually, no, because you're not going to have any babies in the nursery, so you don't need to worry about that. And it wasn't such a big deal. You know, they took away the pacifiers, and I remember more moms saying to me before, why are you giving my baby a pacifier? Than I remember moms after saying, why didn't you give my baby a pacifier? So sometimes I think it's a staff thing. I think we worry what's going to happen when we can't just give the baby a pacifier to calm them down, more than the moms. So that's one of the worries. People will complain, and they won't have, well, these are all myths, because in fact, none of these things really are true. They don't happen. And then step 10 is to foster the establishment of support groups and refer moms out to them. So one thing you're definitely going to find as you become baby friendly, as you work towards increasing breastfeeding rates, is that suddenly, oh my goodness, you have all these people out in the community breastfeeding and there's nowhere for them to go. Because like when we did this and we had people come back, moms and babies come back to the inpatient unit, you know, the baby might have come back to the inpatient unit for, I don't know, a hernia or something. And the whole inpatient unit was ringing lactation because they had a breastfeeding baby, and the breastfeeding was going absolutely fine. It had absolutely nothing to do with the breastfeeding, but they didn't know how to manage a breastfeeding baby on inpatient because they never had any before. And the same thing happens out in the community. So you've got moms in our hospital. We send a lot of our moms to community health centres. And those moms are going to the doctors in those centres, and there's no prep. They don't know how, they haven't had to deal with this volume. Or anesthesiology suddenly rings you up. We've got a mom in for a test. She's breastfeeding. What about this medication? You're going to find this happens consistently, because as the rates go up, the requirement, you create all these new problems because you didn't know how many babies that were breastfeeding before, so you didn't have any breastfeeding problems. So you are going to have to work with the moms and the providers in the community to get education out and to tie the moms into support, like for WIC officers and that kind of thing. So you will find that that's something that you need to do, and that's step 10 anyway. You're supposed to do it. The pediatricians are supposed to come back the babies are supposed to come back per the AAP within the first 3 to 5 days of life, not of post-discharge, but of life. So to meet that requirement, and some places do meet that, and then they forget to sort of mention that as one of the things that they do. But if they provide lactation support at that visit, that's a good way to give outpatient support. You've got community breastfeeding resources and support groups. You need to offer them in different languages, and there are lots of different things. And of course, Oklahoma has the breastfeeding hotline. So you guys have a sort of ready-made thing that you can simply put it on a card and give it to all your moms, and they can have hotline care. And of course, the myth on this is that women will call you if they have a problem. Most moms don't really call. One of the hospitals I work with, they had started where the outpatient lactation consultant goes to every room just before the mom is discharged and introduces herself and gives them a card, and then she proactively calls all the discharged moms, and she said that every day, pretty much, she gets one visit from that. But she wouldn't be getting a visit if people weren't being called. And I'll end with my funny story about my warm line call experience. People only tend to call you when they have really big problems, so be aware of that, because if they call in, they might have a really big problem. And I had 2 calls when I ran the warm line at our hospital. One was that a mom called in and said, this was the question, she said, what formula should I feed the baby because he stopped breastfeeding? That's a funny question for a warm line. So I said, well, when did he stop breastfeeding? And she said, last night. This is like midday. I'm like, oh, well, what's he been eating since last night? And she's like, oh, he hasn't eaten anything since last night. He's just so fussy, you know. He won't breastfeed. He doesn't want to breastfeed anymore. I got the baby in. The baby had meningitis. That was the call. The question she asked was, what formula should I give him? Because he's fussy, because he's not feeding. And, you know, you have to be really careful. And then the other one I got, this is even worse. the mom called me and she goes, so how much of that blue stuff do I put into the milk? I'm like, and this was actually a Spanish-speaking mom, so I couldn't quite understand it. I'm like, what blue stuff? So she said, well, I've got this breast pump, and there's these 2 containers with blue stuff in them. How much am I supposed to put into the milk? It was the Freon in the cooler packs. So, you know, our assumption of what people kind of understand or not can be really, really different from what they're doing. So, you know, on that cautionary note, we really all need to be well educated and help these moms and don't make any assumptions. So I think I have a few minutes for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be delighted to help with them. I hope you're not also sort of stunned that you're just no questions. Come on, guys. You guys in Oklahoma are all friendly and talk. Give me some questions. You must have questions. Yes. I will repeat the question. Okay, go on.
For the on-demand feeding, how do you address the baby who will sleep for 6 or 7 hours and the mother's prepared to let them?
Okay, so on demand, how do you deal with the 6 or 7 hours and moms are prepared to let them? So one thing you're going to notice as you go on this journey is if, for example, these babies go skin to skin at birth and feed in the first hour of life, that releases a lot of the tension because everyone's worrying in the beginning that they're not getting any feed, okay? So, and as you probably all know, I don't know what your position is, the first day, babies do tend to sleep 6 or 7 hours. So in the end, that bit kind of is okay, because as long as they've had a nice feed at the beginning and then they all go to sleep. So the question is, if babies are sleeping consistently, I mean, there's something wrong. Babies shouldn't be, well, the late preterm baby might be one of the ones that you consider as someone that might be sleeping. I mean, they shouldn't be sleeping 6 or 7 hours at birth. So 8 to 12 times in 24 hours. If they're doing that, they're unlikely to be sleeping like 6 hours. If they are doing it, they could be cluster feeding, that kind of thing. So, you know, one answer to that is every single baby is different and you need to manage them carefully. And one of the things you definitely need to manage carefully is your late preterms because they're sleepy. And they should be going home with extra support, not with pacifiers. If you take away the pacifiers, that too will prevent these very long sleeps where the baby's sucking on the pacifier and not waking up. So a lot of these things that you put into place will avoid that happening, and then it's going to be happening only in specific babies like sleepy newborns and preterms, and then you need to put something into place. I mean, you do need to put stuff into place to help these moms that you're now telling to breastfeed, telling to breastfeed. They need to be supported. It's like rooming in. If these moms are rooming in with the babies all the time, the chance of a fall probably goes up just because they're together for longer, right? So you need to be prepared for that. You don't put them together with no monitoring if the mom's on a massive dose of MAG, for example, right? So change is hard. There are risks and benefits to both, but you just have to monitor. And that kind of thing is one of the most important things is to hone it down to that baby. What is the need of this mom and baby? How do we manage this particular situation? Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on managing hypoglycemia?
Hypoglycemia. Who wants to talk about the suggestion I have for how to handle hypoglycemia is to treat every baby separately, okay? Because, again, you know, a lot of places have a magic number. When the magic number's 50, you kind of have a problem because loads and loads of babies get supplemented. But don't so much look at the numbers, look at the babies. So if this is you know, if you go skin to skin at birth and you get a feed in, you're already managing hypoglycemia. If you keep the mums and babies skin to skin and you don't bath them and get them cold and get them all worked up, you're already managing hypoglycemia. If you put them skin to skin in the room and keep them warm and then the baby has the breast right there and when they wake up they feed, you're already managing hypoglycemia. So these steps are designed to reduce the level of problems like that. That if mom can hand express and the baby is hypoglycemic, then you start with hand expression, okay? So all these things go. So it's really important as you go through this not to have a rule, okay, every single baby must be supplemented when they get to 50. Every baby needs to be managed individually. And you will find, I mean, then sometimes the question is, how do we manage the neonatologists rather than how do we manage the hypoglycemia, because the neonatologists are the ones that get really worried. So again, you need to educate people, and you know, there's no one magic number. Of course, if things progress and get really bad and you have to supplement, you do. But one thing that's really, really important to remember is that hypoglycemic babies are those ones that are very much very likely to have some kind of diabetic thing going on with the moms, and that any formula dramatically increases babies' chances of developing diabetes down the road. And we have one Indian Health Service hospital, but I think we have 3 additional tribal hospitals here, and in American Indians and in Hispanics, diabetes rates are absolutely through the roof. And again, talking of safety and protecting the hospital, someday somebody who's got a high-risk baby for diabetes is going to sue the hospital if they give them formula without asking them, because it's automatically putting that child on a track towards getting diabetes. So you don't want that kind of thing to happen either. So you have to balance all of this.
I think we're ready.
Okay.
I think we're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break now. So take advantage of viewing the brag boards out there.